This is something that makes us human.
Right.
This is a hunger that we have that is essential to who we are. This is what they were talking about when we were told man does not live by bread alone.
Welcome to the InSpirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join us as we explore current events and all manner of fascinating topics and explore their connections to Christian living.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today we want to talk about wonder, passion, and purpose. And who better to have with us than Brother Guy Consolmagno, who is a world-renowned astronomer and physicist and the director of the Vatican Observatory. So, Brother Guy, thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I forgot to mention, and a member of the Society of Jesus, right?
A brother in the Society of Jesus,
right. Okay.
Indeed.
Yes. So, again, thank you. And first of all, what do you do? For a lot of people will be surprised to know there is a Vatican Observatory.
Part of our mission is to tell the world that there is an observatory. The observatory was founded by Pope Leo XIII back in 1891, building on other observatories before then. And his purpose was just to show the world that the church supports good science. So when I arrived 30 years ago, the director then said, "Here's your job, do good science." But my job is also to tell people about it, interviews like this, so you're helping me do my job.
Great.
My own astronomy itself is meteorites and the physical properties, and from them trying to understand the asteroid belt, and from that trying to understand the origin of the solar system. So little problems,
Wow. Phenomenal. Okay. And so is this something that you dreamed of doing ever since you were a little child?
The astronomy, yes. The Vatican Observatory, well, I have to say, I did hear about it when I was in grade school. And so I always knew in the back of my mind, and just knowing that it existed kind of confirmed the idea of being an astronomer. But I had a very twisted life going from there to here. I grew up in the 60s. I started kindergarten when Sputnik was launched, the first satellite. I finished high school the year that people landed on the moon. But I'd also done classics in high school. I'd gone to the Jesuit high school. So after I'd studied classics at the Jesuit high school, I went to Boston College. No idea what to do. Maybe I'd be a Jesuit. And I talking to a priest there who said I should pray about my vocation. I'm thinking, I'm 18, who prays? But he was right. And I won't go into the long story except to say it was quite clear to me that God was telling me I did not have a vocation to be a priest. To put it short, I'm a nerd, and I do a whole lot better with rocks than I do with people. But having said that, it was also I should go to the place where I felt passion, the place where I was just eager to go to. My best friend from high school was at MIT, which is just up the road from Boston College. I'd spend every weekend there, and I felt alive there in the way that I didn't at BC. BC is a wonderful school, but it wasn't for me. And so I transferred to MIT, and I had that first experience of, this is where I belong. And I think most of our lives are searching for that, this is where I belong moment. And I had my first one there.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people are searching for, to know where they belong and where they can find a sense of meaning and purpose in life.
And it's not just, I'm happy, because I was happy at BC, but I was content. And more, I was excited not only about where I was, but what this meant that I could be. I took to the science really wonderfully. It turns out I'm good at it. I'm good at being a nerd. They sent me off to Arizona to do a doctorate, brand new program. Now it's been 50 years. But the idea of studying planets was still very new in 1975. We had just started sending probes to the planets. I kept doing this, postdocing at Harvard, postdocing at MIT. If you know the academic world, 5 years as a postdoc means you couldn't get a real job. So even though I was at Harvard and MIT, I was sort of then wondering, why am I doing this when people are starving in the world? And I didn't have an answer. It was that Jesuit conscience coming back to haunt me. So instead, I thought I was going to quit science. I quit my job at MIT, and I joined the U.S. Peace Corps. They sent me to Kenya. Great, I'm going to be, in the third world, I'm going to be helping. Well, the people in Kenya saw me and said, wonderful. Can you teach astronomy, astrophysics at the University of Nairobi? Which is what I did for 2 years.
Really? Is that real? Wow.
But, I mean, in the one sense, I was teaching the guys who were waiting to take jobs at the Kenya Science Teachers College to teach the teachers, to teach the... You know, there was a practical side to it. But what I discovered, I'd go up country with all my fellow Peace Corps volunteers, where they were in the real Peace Corps, you know, with the houses with mud huts, thatched roofs and all of that. I loved it up there. I had a little telescope, and everybody in the village would come and look through my telescope. And they wanted to see, the moons of Jupiter. They wanted to see the craters on our moon. They wanted to see the rings. Have you ever seen the rings of Saturn in a little telescope?
No.
I have never met anyone who has ever seen the rings of Saturn and not gone, oh, wow. And, that's what I was feeling last week, the last time I saw it.
Wow.
After 60 years of looking through a telescope.
Amazing.
And I discovered, of course, that everybody in Kenya goes, oh, wow. And then they want to know, what is NASA discovering? What was it like on the moon? What do we, how did those things get there? What am I looking at? All of these questions about who are we? What is this universe? How do we fit in? And I realized, I had a very clever cat in those days, but my cat never wanted to look through the telescope.
Right.
This is something that makes us human.
Right.
This is a hunger that we have that is essential to who we are. This is what they were talking about when we were told man does not live by bread alone.
And I like that you used the word hunger, because you went into the Peace Corps trying to, in some ways, respond to the need for material things, which is very real. But you go even to the poorest corners of the world and you realize man isn't just thinking about bread alone. There's something.
And everybody, I don't care how poor you are, how remote you are, what corner of the world you are, if you have a human soul, you have this hunger. And if you deny somebody the chance to fulfill that hunger, you're denying them their humanity. So an awful lot of what we were doing was saying, these are legitimate questions. These are the same questions we have. And let's explore it. Because we don't have answers in the back of the book, any more than love is a problem that can be solved with an answer in the back of the book. It's something that continually grows, and something where you say, oh, I thought I understood this, but now I see it in a new light, and it never stops. So in that sense, it's very much a spiritual journey.
Indeed. And what I find intriguing is that we live in a country where, thanks be to God, we don't have to worry about material needs. All of our material needs are met and, in abundance, in superabundance. And yet somehow we can lose the sense of wonder. It's like you think, oh, our needs are met, so we have time and opportunity to ponder the world. But we don't. We still end up thinking a lot about material things and money.
And not only that, but you also end up with this hunger, which expresses itself in a sort of ennui, in a sort of, is that all there is? Well, maybe if I had, the next biggest cell phone, maybe if I had the better computer, maybe if I had a bigger car, and none of those things are going to satisfy. But we're afraid to look beyond our own little cocooned world for fear of getting out of, as they say, our comfort zone. And to me, astronomy is a great way of breaking yourself out of that. If you want to see just a practical thing that anybody can do, go outside every night and look up at the sky. Now, the first thing you might be able to see is the moon. Remember that it's there. Anybody can see it. And usually, even in the worst of cities, you can see a few stars. But Pope Benedict had a marvelous line in one of his homilies on Easter Saturday night. You know how Easter Saturday, the liturgy is all about candles and light and darkness. And a lot of that is lost nowadays because we have artificial lights. So the idea of, people have seen a great light. Well, you see a great light all the time. The old phrase of the book, it was a dark and stormy night. Go outside in stormy nights and they're not dark anymore because the clouds reflect city lights.
Wow.
And Pope Benedict put it this way: we create our human lights that are so bright that they blind us to God's light. And that's what human sinfulness is. So when you can see the moon or a few bright stars shining through the light pollution, then you realize this is what's happening to my life. I have filled my life with my own light to try to block out, to try to keep away God's light, because that's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever get a chance to go someplace where you can see the night sky, then you have a sense of what the scripture was talking about.
And what you're proposing is really a very practical remedy for the materialism and consumerism of our age, which is just go outside and look at the sky.
It's also a remedy against despair, against, I remember, after 9/11, when the world seemed to be falling down and everything was terrible. But you could go outside and they were the same stars.
Wow.
I remember when I was in Kenya for the very first time and incredibly homesick. And I went outside and saw not only the new stars that I can see looking to the south from when I was at the equator, and that was exciting, but I could also see the stars that I had grown up with. If you know the sky, then you're never not at home.
That is amazing. Thank you. Imagine a young person, much like yourself when you were younger, and thinking about their future and their life, looking for a sense of purpose, wanting to live for more than just money and material things. What advice would you give them?
I'm going to steal it from the best, from St. Ignatius in his spiritual exercises. What you should do is schedule some good time to daydream. And daydream different possible futures. But here's the trick. Go beyond I'm going to be an NBA star. I'd love to be a star of the NBA. Okay, if I'm going to be playing basketball, then ask yourself, how will it feel to be on the road all the time and never be home? How will it feel to not be able to walk down the street without people recognize you? When does that get old? How will it feel to have people trying to steal your money from you and you're always worrying about that? If those things suddenly make you realize that's not such a fun job, and yet you still have such a passion for basketball that you would put up with it, then you know something. All right, that's maybe a direction, not an NBA star, but to go into athletics. You're daydreaming about, the perfect person you're going to marry, and, you've got a real crush on somebody in your class. Ask yourself, then what? Okay, we get married, then what? Okay, we have kids, then what? Okay, I've got to put up with her parents, then what? Do this daydreaming, but daydream beyond to see, is this really where I want to go? And then, after the dream is over, after you've gone to sleep or whatever, the next day, think back on it. Where was the place where I felt contentment? Where was the place that I felt, this was right? And those should be your hints for where to look. But part of it, and you can do this when you're young, is to try out lots of things. I enjoyed working in my high school newspaper, so I got a summer job working in a newspaper. And there are a lot of things about newspaper work I really liked, but the first night I was in town, there was a racket outside my window, and I closed the window because I was reading a book. And the next day they said, there was a train derailment out your window. Why didn't you go out and look at it? Oh, I guess I really don't have the soul of a reporter who wants to know what's that racket. Maybe that's not the job for me. You try out a few things and you go, it's not like I thought it was going to be. Maybe a whole lot better, maybe a whole lot worse. But when you're young, you can try out things. You can take different courses. I knew a fellow who was in graduate school in astronomy, doing radio astronomy, which is a lot of signal processing and interpretation of strange signals. And just out of he doesn't know where, he took one course in medical physics, where he learned, of course, that everything he'd learned in radio astronomy could be applied to understanding MRI imaging. He now runs a big MRI institute in Southern California. Shifted his career entirely because he tried this one thing and it said, this is what I could do. And this is right for me. And it's not going to be right for everybody. It's not going to be what your parents or your friends say, though you should ask them because, as you're going through different things. I was nearly 40 when I entered the Jesuits, when I decided to become a brother. It was, I had many more steps beyond the peace before I got there. And of course you ask your friends. And the idea of going into religious life, the people who encouraged me the most were my former girlfriends. Maybe they knew something.
Former girlfriends.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. There's a reason why it didn't work out.
Yeah. Well, this has been immensely helpful. And I think your vision for life is filled with hope and awe and a sense that we can, and we ought to, as human beings, pursue something meaningful and something that gives us, I believe the word uses contentment.
Yeah.
A
Here's a secret that nobody told me when I was younger, and I'll tell you.
Thank you.
God wants us to be happy. It turns out that the things we think are going to make us happy usually don't. Yeah. Like, an extra large ice cream sundae. No, that's not the route to happiness. But God does want us to be happy. He does not want us to be miserable. He's trying to tell you something if you are miserable. Listen, he's trying to help.
Well, that is a perfect note to conclude on. Listen. And I know for me personally, I'm being convicted. I haven't looked up at the sky for I don't know how long. So, I think that's something we can all take away from this, to look up at the stars, to wonder and to listen, because God wants us to be happy. Brother Guy, thank you so much for being here with us. It's a real honor, really. Thank you.
It's a delight. Best of luck with your work, and God bless you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the InSpirit podcast. InSpirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.